How to identify problems within a company. Hi everyone, my name is Johannes and welcome to my channel where I talk about my learning experiences and thoughts from my journey as a strategy consultant, and this means that we talk about consulting, business and mindset. And if you're new to this channel, then please make sure to subscribe to it. Please also leave a thumb up. This will help you that you don't miss any new video here. And today we talk about how you can identify problems within a company. You see, as management consultants, our task is very often to analyze companies and to think about, okay, what challenges are they facing? What problems do we have that we can solve as consultants to increase the overall performance? And today I want to talk a little bit about how you can do that. And I want to give you some very practical advice and also a little bit of background understanding and knowledge on how you actually do that. So I would say let's immediately start. So if we talk about problems within a company, then we can say that there are certain symptoms that you can see as a consultant or as a manager, but what you very often do not see are the causes. So this means that the symptoms are profitability, the liquidity, the equity and the balance sheet politics. We talk about that in a second, but it means that you can actually measure or actually see those things, for example, in the annual report. What you don't see, what is below the first surface, at least if you're outside the company, are strategic issues, structural issues, operative issues, and cultural issues. So what you typically do in consulting is that you take a look at the symptoms, because this is what you can actually analyze. If you take a look at the balance sheet of the P&L and the cash flow statement, for example, then you can see the symptoms. But then during the project, and this is, if we talk about structuring the problem, formulating hypotheses and so on, this is what we are talking about. We are talking about, the iceberg that is below the surface. Here we really need to do the analysis to find out what the causes for the problems are. The thing is, and this is why it's so important to learn about that, or why consultancies are also very often hired, is because you have certain levels of crisis. And at the beginning, if you have some strategic issues, structural issues, operative issues, cultural issues, at the beginning you only have a strategic crisis. So this means maybe that you lose some market share, that maybe your sales go slightly down, maybe that you leave some lose some key personnel. But those are not things that are too dangerous. Those are bad signs. Of course, you need to change something, but this is not life-threatening for a company. The next stage is that your profitability decreases. So you have a profitability crisis, and this means that maybe you're even not profitable anymore, or at least that you significantly lose profitability. And if you don't do anything here, you go to the next stage, and this becomes a liquidity crisis, because if your company is not profitable anymore, then obviously you use all your cash reserves that you have in order to finance the company, and very, very quickly you get liquidity issues. And this is where it really gets dangerous, because this is a serious threat to the existence of the company. So this means that we as consultants always try to find out what the actual problem is. It's like a doctor, we can take a look at the symptoms, but we really need to take a look below the surface to understand what the actual problems of a company really are. And if we take a look at the symptoms, then we can categorize into 4 broader categories. So the first one is the profitability, and usually you take a look at the P&L statement, which you can find in the annual report, and this is where you get the numbers from. And what you can see, some symptoms for problems might be negative margins, extraordinary earnings that you see in the P&L, low productivity, non-competitive cost structures, if maybe the SG&A cost or the variable costs are too high, or if you have low gross margins. If you take a look at the liquidity, and you usually find that in the cash flow statement, so you take a look at the operational cash flow, at the financing and the investing cash flow, there are also some signs that this company has serious problems. For example, they can have a negative cash flow. They can have a liquidity squeeze, which means that there is a lack of liquidity, that they have difficulties in raising new capital. So you would see that in the financing cash flow, that they have really insufficient or bad liquidity planning, or maybe they have some delayed payments because they are not able to pay anymore. If you take a look at the equity, you usually see that in the balance sheet. And then you can see, maybe the company has reduced equity ratios. So they take on more and more debt, and this reduces the equity ratios. So this might be a first sign of potential problems. Maybe, they have a high debt ratio. It's pretty much the same. They have decreasing cash reserves. This goes hand in hand with the liquidity topic we just talked about. Maybe they also have high accruals. Okay, so this could also be a problem. So those are symptoms that you see in the balance sheet in terms of equity. And also one thing that most people forget, but that is very, very important. You don't hear that very often, but this means that if you do an analysis of a company, if you want to find out if there are any problems, or if you want to formulate hypotheses, that you also take a look at the balance sheet politics, because very often there is a certain room for the CFO to kind of tweak a little bit the numbers. I mean, it's still all legal, but they have a certain room of action where they can, report in a certain way that makes the company look more profitable, more healthy than it actually is. Okay, so you should take a look at, did they change maybe the depreciation periods? So where there's some amortization of hidden reserves. Have there been some sales and leasebacks, for example? Have there been any divestments? Okay, so those are the typical things that you can watch out for, and this could give you a first sign of potential problems that you see. And those are the symptoms, and it's very important, and this is typically where you start if you do the initial analysis. In the previous video, we talked about how to analyze companies. This is, so to say, the follow-up. So if you did the initial analysis, then you typically know about the symptoms, because you usually see that in the annual statement. But the big question now is, those are only the symptoms, and like a doctor, he only sees that you have a fever, but he doesn't know this is a symptom, but he doesn't know what the actual problem is, and for that he has to do the analysis. And it's the same in consulting. Here we also have to do the analysis to really find out what the actual problem is. And if we take a look at the causes, then we see that there are strategic issues, structural issues, operative issues, and cultural issues. And what I want to do now in the next minutes is that I walk through each of those issues and talk a little bit about potential issues that you could have in this area. So if we take a look at the strategic issues first, then what could be potential problems here? So maybe your strategy doesn't match the market developments. Maybe we have a new technological trends, maybe we have a change in customer behavior, and your strategy simply doesn't fit anymore. Maybe there's a lack of long-term vision and guidelines. So maybe the company, this management is only short-term oriented. Obviously, this is a problem. Maybe you have an unbalanced company portfolio or product life cycle portfolio. This means that you only have cash cows, but you don't have new products coming up that help you to grow the business in the future. Maybe you have a change in company competitive dynamics. Maybe a supplier, a customer becomes too powerful. Maybe you have new people entering the market. This might be threatening. Maybe you have high complexity within your company. So you have a complex product portfolio, you have too complex customer structures, which means that you don't have a few customers that are easy to handle, that bring most of the revenue, but that you have a large and diversified customer base, which makes the entire sales process very inefficient. Or you have complex structures. Maybe you have some uncoordinated diversification. Diversification can be a good thing, but not if it's uncoordinated. This means, that people and regional managers spend a lot of money on, new business initiatives that do not fit into the overall strategy. This can also often happen very often. Sometimes you have a lack of digitization or use of technology. Maybe, they have ancient processes or ancient structures. Maybe they have, not the state-of-the-art tools. Maybe this is an issue that they have. Sometimes they have inappropriate high investments in acquisitions. So this is especially, if the CEO or the top management team is incentivized by growth, then, the easiest way is to just buy businesses. And, buying businesses itself doesn't add any value. You typically pay a premium, and you also need to integrate the company and produce some synergies. Otherwise, you don't add any value to the business. You also can have a high dependency on customers and suppliers, or a lack of preparation for macro trends. So this means, if there are any macro trends, I just published 2 videos about the book, The Great Reset or The Great Narrative. So there are some macro trends like sustainability, for example. If you're not prepared for that, then obviously this is a strategic issue. And what we usually do in consulting is that we have similar checklists where we take a look at the client's situation and really try to find out, okay, what might be strategic issues. Then the next lever is that we take a look at structural issues, and this can also be a big problem that leads maybe to P&L issues. So for example, maybe a company has too complex company structures. Maybe they have a very complex metrics structure that is very hard to manage. Maybe they have too many locations. Very often, even in the same country, they might have, different production facilities, which is very cost intense. Sometimes they have uncoordinated M&A activities, that they just buy things without really having a strategy and without proper integration. This is very often a huge topic in companies. Maybe they have a lack of synergies within the companies, and this is if regions and divisions think in silos. So they think of, they don't think as a company, as a collective company. They rather think in divisions, and this obviously prevents a company to create synergies between the regions or the divisions, which is very often a huge problem within businesses. Maybe they have inefficient processes, maybe they have a lack of controlling, or maybe they have inefficient incentives. This could all be signs that there are structural issues within the company. Also, there could be operative issues, and this is the next category. So this means maybe they have a low productivity, they have inefficient cost structures, or they even accept unprofitable orders. And you will be surprised how often this happens. Very often there is not much transparency in the sales department. So this means that companies are accepting offers, although this offer creates a negative gross margin even. Okay, and this is obviously a huge problem. In terms of liquidity, sometimes you have bad liquidity management or high working capital, and this obviously means that the cash doesn't work probably the way you want it to work. Quality can also be an issue, so that there is a lack of know-how or that there is a bad product or service quality. And usually you see that if there are bad customer reviews, and this is kind of, the step before you lose revenue, because typically if your quality decreases, this very often means that it doesn't take very long until you also lose your first customers. And last but not least, I also want to talk about cultural issues, because very often, and this is really, really hard to detect, you see that under the surface because people stick to old habits. You see some cultural resistance toward innovation. So if people are not open for new ideas, not open for innovation, you also have inefficient internal and external communication. This means that the strategy maybe is not properly communicated top down, or that departments do not communicate well among each other. This or even bottom-up communication doesn't work, so that the management doesn't really know about certain issues within the company. This can also happen, and those are obviously huge problems. You often also see a high degree of politics, so that the power and the status of certain people is more important than the actual results. This is very, very bad, but you see that very often. And you also see then a focus on individuals and not the collective. So especially if managers see themselves as too important, or are more about status increase and strengthen their own position within a company, rather than really developing the business. This is usually very, very dangerous and can lead to huge problems. Then, of course, no integration of acquisitions. We tackled that before. You also see a lack of motivation within a company if people just don't care anymore because they don't know why they are doing it. And also a lack of leadership, especially, if you have a weak management board or a weak leadership style. This is, very common that this leads also to problems that are very, very visible if you take a look at the symptoms. Good. With that being said, those are the 4 issues that you have. Usually you have like the strategic issues, the structural issues, then the organizational ones, and then the cultural ones. And what you usually do in consulting is that you take a look at the symptoms and then really throughout the project try to understand, okay, what the underlying issues really are. And this helps you to solve the problem. This helps you to find a solution for the client. And this is very, very necessary at some point for the company, because otherwise, if you do not take a look at these issues, if you do not do the work and really think about how you can improve things, then the company moves from a strategic crisis to a profitability crisis to a liquidity crisis, and then the company is at the end bankrupt. And to prevent that, we have to do the analysis. With that being said, I am of course interested what your ideas are about that. Have I forgotten something? Are there any other aspects that I should or that people in consulting should consider? Then please write it in a comment. With that being said, if this brought value to you, then please leave a thumb up, also subscribe to this channel. And with that being said, I hope to see you very soon. I wish you a very successful day. Talk to you soon. Goodbye, Johannes.